Hey there guys, thank you for joining me today. Today's project will be a pumpkin, so really simple shapes. The paints that I will be using are the Micador brand paints and also the Mungyo paints, which come in a nice tin set. And I've just taken the colours out that I'll be using today. I'll also be using my favourite brush, which is the 00 Rigger script brush. This brand is a Princeton, and also the roymac size 8 Rigger, which is nice and soft and it gives nice coverage. So they're the two brushes I'll be using. I've got two jars of water and just some paper towel. The outline will be provided for those of you who do struggle when they draw. So ideally, the first thing I really want to do is tackle the segments of the pumpkin. Now, the highlight or highlighted area will be on the top of the pumpkin and on the side of the pumpkin. So these are the values that we need to keep light. I've drawn out the sketch, but what I've also done is I've taken an eraser and I've slightly erased out the outline. This will help because we are using an orange color, and obviously pencil lines and things like that, you will see through those quite easily. So if we erase the lines to start off with, we won't have too many dramas. Now the paper I'm using is not a watercolor paper. It is from the Papermill, and they are ivory sheets, and I've just got one sheet of those, and it is an A4 size. It says it's ultra smooth mixed media paper, so we'll give this a go and use it for this project. It does suggest it's good for pencil, pen and light wash. So ideally today is light wash, and we'll see what happens, and hopefully we will create a really nice pumpkin. So we have orange colors that we're going to focus on, and we're going to do some greens and browns in this stem section. So to start off with, I just want to slightly wet the paper. I'm using the size 8 first, and I don't know how this paper will react, so I just want to bring in a little bit of water, and I want to do a segment at a time. So I'm bringing the water to the paper. I'm just outlining it with the water and then bringing up that water and letting it absorb into the paper. Now this is quite a light wash of water. I'm not putting too much in there at all. I'm just letting that absorb in. And then I'm drying off my brush. And then I'm going to go straight into the colour. And I'm just going to use the yellow colour from the Micador palette set. And just bring that in. So just bringing that colour straight into the paper. Now I haven't really used this paper for the watercolors, so it'll all be quite experimental. And I'm going straight in with the colour, so I don't really know how it's going to react with this paper, but so far so good. There's 50 sheets in this pad, so it really allows for some good experimenting and painting. So all I'm doing is just drawing this colour up really lightly. And I'm quite happy with the dispersion of that colour and the way it's reacting with the paper. So what I'll continue doing now is I'll paint in the next segment. Just coming in with the water wash quite light. I don't want to flood the paper. Again, this is a thinner paper. And the reason I'm doing segments is when these two lines join, sometimes when you paint, the bleeds and the blends aren't that great. So this will create the segments and the shadows for you. Again, just coming in with that colour and dropping it in. And that's my next segment. This is a very easy painting, and I'm tackling it segment by segment. I feel that sometimes when people tackle a painting, they're tackling too much at one time, and that's when their painting starts to fall apart. So I'll just go to the next segment now. And when I say fall apart, what happens is they do too much too soon, and the painting then tends to just fall apart. And when I say fall apart, I'm literally meaning that they're putting too much color in straight away. They're not focusing on their composition. They're not focusing on where their light values are coming from. And then again, I'm just coming in with the color and dropping that in. So I'm already starting to bring in that sort of shadow on each segment just by dropping this initial color in. I'm just drawing that color upwards. This paper is quite smooth. And I'll go to the next segment on this side now. Just bring in that water. If your brush starts to bend, it means there's not enough water on it for control. So bring some more water into play. There's quite long bristles on this one. Just dropping in that color again. I'm going a little bit darker here with my color drop, only because this is sort of the shadowed area of this segment. So I'm quite happy to have stronger color in there. And then working my way around to the next segment. I've just got paint on my brush already, so I've just moved in with that. And then the lighter segment behind. And then we've got a couple of more segments here. I'm just popping that yellow in. So far so good. We've got that first layer down. I'm going to let that slightly dry, but not too much, so the paper will still be moist. Now the paper's still a little bit wet. I can see that it's glistening in the natural light, and that's okay. I'm going to start on the bottom section now, and I'm going to bring in just a little bit of this violet colour. It's a little bit of a purple colour. I'm just going to pop that down the bottom base of the pumpkin. And what I'm doing here is I'm marking out where the shadows are of the pumpkin. So just dipping straight into that colour. I'm just using the initial line that was drawn in the picture. Just moving that violet colour around. This groove here is a little bit darker, so coming in nice and strong. And again, just bringing in that violet value down the bottom, really gently moving the colour and the water. It's just a darker bit here. And I'm doing the same in that little section of that segment. Slightly come in here with the violet. So where your segments meet is where you're placing the violet. Just a little bit in here. And this is like the lightest wash. I'm not using an intense wash at all. And now I'm just cleaning out my brush and then just blending in the violet in the corners. Just the edges. Just blend that in a little bit. And soften that edge. Now when you're happy with what you've done there, the paper's still slightly wet, we're going to start bringing in the orange colour. So I'm going to start off with this Mungyo orange. It's quite intense. And I'm just going to paint in the segments first. So just the lines. Just using the tip and drawing my rigger down. I'm just following my way around. So you're bringing the brush up like you'd be using a pen. We're just drawing in these segments. Now when you're happy with that, this is where we're going to start dropping in some nice colour. So we'll bring in the orange from the micador set. We'll start at the bottom and we'll just drop that in. And we're going to push the colour up. Now the top ends here, we want to leave highlighted. So we're just pushing the colour in certain sections. Straight in, start from the bottom. Now this colour's bleeding through and I'm not panicking about that at all. I'll show you how to fix that up in 1 second. Just using the brush on its side and pushing that colour up and around. Just going to move that colour down and just tidy up that little bleed. Nothing to panic about. And then continue moving this colour up. The middle of the pumpkin is darker. Again, I'm doing the same here, starting off nice and strong and moving that colour up. That purple will now act really nicely as a shadow and show through. And that'll just soften in here by drawing that colour out. And I want to do the same here. I'm going to come in nice and strong with the orange through here. And then I want to use the brush to bring it out and down. Just getting rid of the colour using a clean brush and just moving that paint around now. And then dragging up this section. Now the paper I'm using, like I said, it's not a watercolour paper. So just experimenting with this one for now. But I'm enjoying what the watercolours are doing on this paper. And I am coming in quite heavy with the water, so it's looking all right. And then I'm just cleaning out that brush again, just drawing out that colour slightly, leaving that top highlight. And I'll work my way around again. And I'll take a little bit of this orange and bring that to the party here. I really want to go quite intense. And I'm using the strokes around the pumpkin. So my lines are following the segments. And as I come up, I'm just leaving some highlights. So this edge is quite light. So I'm just doing a few lines like that. And then I'm going to use a clean brush and just bring that line down. And again, coming nice and strong with the orange again. Follow that line, the other segment. Up and around. Just brush on its side for more coverage. But you're using the lightest touch as you paint this. Now in here is darker. So I really want to bring in a little bit more of that violet, and I'll just take a little bit of that violet and just pop that in to the top of the pumpkin. Just a little bit more, like so. And just let that dry in a little bit, and then I'm going to come back in with this violet again Just bring it up, working on those darker values, and I'm dropping them into this orange. Still wet, the paper, so the colours are merging really nicely. Just bringing it up and letting those colours naturally merge. The pumpkin on the bottom will be darker, so you can really bring in these values. And I really want these colours to sort of merge and do their own thing, so it looks semi-controlled. Just wisping up that colour and softening the edges. Dropping in that violet. And then as it's still wet, I'm just going to blend that out and soften that edge up. I don't want very, very harsh lines. Just flicking it upwards, following the lines of the pumpkin. I'm going to bring in the intensity of the orange now as this dries a little bit. And just curve that around and bring your stroke downwards and follow the pumpkin's lead. So we're following the segments again. And then I'm going to do a few lines here like this to add some texture in. Then I'm going to use my brush and just soften. So I've still got that highlight there, but I've brought in a little bit of texture. Straight in with the orange again. And I'm working on the colour intensity of the middle belly of this pumpkin. Using my lines to the side and then bringing them down. Flicking them up. Just following the lines down and softening those edges. And I'll do the same thing again with the next segment. Just dropping in that orange. And again, following those segment lines is really important. It's really allowing you to get some texture on this pumpkin. I'm creating some lines as I go. I'll come in nice and dark here because this is a separate segment. And then I'm using my brush clean to just disperse that colour and soften those lines. Okay, this is still wet. Dipping into the orange and moving my way to this side and intensifying my colour by flicking up that brush. I'm working from the bottom because my colour's a little bit more intense, but remember the light factor that's hitting this side remains light. So we don't want to get rid of the light value that we've created here. So we'll just blend this out with a clean brush. And then just bring that orange in now because that violet is dried. Just from the top. There's a little bit of a highlight there. And I'm dropping that orange into the violet. And then I'm going to use a clean brush just to pick up that colour a bit and move it. And I'll do the same here. And just bring in some more colour intensity. Now this segment here has a darker value, so I'm just popping in a little bit of straight orange. And then I'll use my brush nice and clean to just disperse the colour out and soften that edge. Now, just with the orange again, working my way from the bottom. And I'm applying that orange now straight onto that violet And again, working my lines upwards. It's just a little bit of a flick. And that's all I'm doing to create this texture and vividness. So at the moment, ideally the two colours that I've really consistently used is the violet from the micador set and the orange from the micador set. Now all I'm doing is I'm just coming into the middle belly section of this and just dropping in some more colour. Again, I'm following the lead of the segments and curving my lines as I go. Just working my way around. This paper's doing quite well with all this water. Just a little bit more violet now. Just dropping that in. Straight into that orange. The violet works really well without dulling your colour, but it does help create these beautiful shadows. And the colour intensity still remains, which is fantastic. Just with a clean brush, I'll just soften this edge up a little bit. Just bring in a little bit more violet. So it's an interchange between the violet and the orange at the moment. Just darkening up those areas. Now that violet's bleeding out a little bit, and that's fine. I'm just going to use the brush to guide it where I want it. And then I'm just going to start slowly just dropping in the violet, just dotting it in almost. And then using my brush to move it. So the slightest little bit of violet, not too much water. And then using your brush to move the colour along. Now I've slightly dried off this section. There's still some wet bits here and there. You can use the water to move around your colour if you're not happy with any of the sections. And again, bring in a little bit more depth. Again, I'm just coming in with the violet and just dropping that in. Just cleaning up this edge a little bit and moving that water across. I really want to start texturizing this pumpkin. And really bringing in those values. Just cleaning up that edge. There's a little bit too much water there, so I'm just moving it across. A little bit more violet. Again, just the violet on the bottom to intensify the segments. and a little bit up here. Now when you're happy with how that's sitting, then you can come in with the greens. So I'll do that now. The darker green value is in the center of the stem. So I'm just placing water straight down and then just grabbing some of this green from the palette and moving it down the center, but not all the way down. So this moss green is really a green that I like to use a lot. It's disappearing from my palette quite quickly. I'm just dropping that in. So as it dries, I'm dropping in a little bit more. And then I'm just going to go a little bit lighter and blend in that colour. Now, I'm going to bring in a little bit of brown. Again, you could bring in the violet, but just the brown, just a normal brown. You can use any colour. I'm just bringing that in and using that in the middle to darken the value of this stem. Just dropping that in for texture. And then just adding a bit of water, which will add interest and texture, and let that dry. So as that's drying, I'll come in at the bottom where there's some shadows and shading, and this is where I'll come in with my rigger, so the 00 rigger, and I'm going to pop straight into the darkest blue that I've got here, which is the indigo, and just bring that in straight onto the paper. And then I'll just disperse that by using the rigger on its side and following the line of the pumpkin. And again, I'll do that on the other side and disperse that colour down and around. And then I'm just going to bring in a little bit more water with a little bit of orange and disperse that into the blue. Just a little bit more water and disperse that blue around. I want it to look washed and dispersed. A little bit more blue. When you're happy with that, I'm just going to dry this section off a little bit and then I'll come in with some details. Okay, I've dried that section off now. Now I'm coming back in with my rigger, and I'm just coming back to that indigo and just coming in nice and strong again, straight out of the palette, twisting the rigger in the palette to get the colour. And then just getting in there. These really darker values right underneath. Just making my way around. carefully using that rigger to outline. And then just bringing the water in to soften the edge. And bring it around. I'm not coming in too heavy-handed. And then just a little bit of that orange again. Disperse it around. And let it intermingle with that blue. And that's where the pumpkin's glowing with its shadow. Just moving my way around. And curving that shadow up a little bit. And I'm just going to use my brush and just drag out that colour a little bit. And really soften that shadow and let it sort of bleed down the paper. At this point you can add a little bit of violet. And just drop it in and work your way around. And just come in with my bigger brush now, just to soften those edges and pick up some of that water. And so as this dries now, we can just come back in now with our greens. And I'll go straight into the moss with the rigger and work on my lines now. Fairly dry, you don't want too much water. And the stem itself is a little bit segmented. So the inner one is dark. And then we're just going to work on the side one by coming in and doing the same on the other side. I'm happy to pop in a little bit of yellow to disperse that green and create a little bit of texture. So I'm just popping some water in, a little bit of yellow on the top, and just letting the watercolour sort of dance around and do its own little thing up there to create a little bit of interest. And then I'm coming in with a little bit of that violet down the bottom and blending that through the base and bringing that colour up the green. Again, just intensifying now and just popping those details in for the pumpkin. Just move that in. Don't want too much darkness, but you want to balance out your painting. And then I'll just come in with the orange for my final values. Again, using the rigger. A bit more orange for that segment. Again, push your colour down and follow the lines of the segments. These are just the final little details. Again, softening up those edges. Coming in a little bit stronger with my orange. Softening my edges again with water, following the lines of the segment up and around. So you've created some texture there, which is great. And then just bring in a little bit more orange here. Work my way around. And wherever I'm darkening the value, it's also helping those whites pop out a little bit more without stressing about that I haven't left enough white in the painting. And again, just letting that watercolor merge and mingle. Pumpkin skin is quite textured and it's bumpy and lumpy, so you do want these bleeds in the watercolor to really show off those elements of the pumpkin. And all I'm doing now is just dropping in color until I get the intensity that I want. Super simple. The shapes are simple, the colors are simple. Now it's up to you. Sometimes the pumpkin has like the little bit of the stem that does a bit of a twirl. So you can just take that and create the twirl. Up the top, just for point of interest. And you can bring in a little bit more of that green and a little bit more of the brown, and let that sort of bleed in, because that'll create some really nice texture. Just dropping in a little bit more brown there. And there you have it, one pumpkin. Hope you guys enjoyed, and give it a go. Post it on the page and we'll see how we go. Thanks for watching.